Welcome to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Kam Alexander, Jake McQuaide, and Julian Pearl. And goodbye Roc Taylor, Breiden Fehoko, and Devin Harper. So, the Pittsburgh Steelers have signed 3 players to their roster today, while also cutting 3 other players in corresponding moves. But before I get more into the introductions and the goodbyes to the people we lost, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news and updates. Also like this video. Now, let's get right into it. So, we have signed a defensive back, a long snapper, and offensive tackle, while releasing a wide receiver, a defensive tackle, and a linebacker. And let's start off with the wide receiver that got cut, and that's Roc Taylor. Because Roc Taylor is popular amongst Steeler Nation in terms of a player that people thought were underrated and could have actually made this team. He came in after this year's NFL draft as an undrafted free agent. And whenever I mentioned who is a player that you think could make this team, Roc Taylor's name came up, and people thought that he actually had a good chance because his film was good in college. He just never got drafted, and he was cut today, and it was kind of unexpected because you really didn't think he was going to get cut, and he did play pretty solid in the preseason, getting multiple catches per game, putting up 40 yards per game. He was doing pretty solid here in preseason, but I guess the Pittsburgh Steelers saw that he had no chance to make this roster compared to some other players, and said, hey, he is expendable. But he is released today, and he is no longer going to have a chance to make this 53-man roster. Can he be back eventually as a kind of practice squad addition or addition later on down the road? Sure. But as of right now, he is gone. So now let's jump into the signings the Pittsburgh Steelers have before I get more into the other 2 releases that the Pittsburgh Steelers did earlier. And those signings was Kam Alexander. And we're going to start off with him, because Kam Alexander is a defensive back who was literally just on a team earlier in the week, and that was the Seattle Seahawks. But the Seattle Seahawks decided to cut him, and the Pittsburgh Steelers liked him enough to immediately pick him up without bringing him in for a tryout or anything like that. They just immediately signed him. So when looking at Alexander, he actually went undrafted in this year's NFL Draft 2025. But he did participate in training camp with the Atlanta Falcons and the Seattle Seahawks, and then was signed to the Seattle Seahawks not too long after. Looking at Alexander, he measured in at 5'10", 183 pounds at the combine for this year's NFL Draft and the Pro Day. So he has 31 1/4 inch arms, 76 5/8 inch wingspan, and he clocked a 4.48 second 40-yard dash time, and added in a 41.5 inch vertical jump and 11'1" broad jump. So last season at Oregon, he actually transferred after spending time at UTSA and Sam Houston State earlier in his collegiate career. Alexander, he played in 12 games for Oregon Ducks, but the production that he had was limited. He recorded just 4 tackles and 1 interception in those 12 games. And that interception came against the Boilermakers. So prior to his time with the Ducks, Alexander was a first-team All-American Athletic Conference defensive back for UTSA, and he was named to the Frisco Bowl Defensive MVP list in 2023 against Marshall. So he is a player that obviously had some good times in college, but later on down the road, his production in college just dropped off, and then he went undrafted. So do I expect him to make this actual roster? Probably not. But does he have a chance to go out and compete and show out? Yes, he does, of course. There's injuries to the Steelers' defensive back room, obviously with Corey Trice, and they may be looking for a guy, and at the practice squad list, he may be a part of down the road. But Alexander is now a Pittsburgh Steeler. Kam Alexander, that is. Now, moving over to the other players the Pittsburgh Steelers signed. They actually signed long snapper Jake McQuaide, and this was because their current long snapper Christian Kuntz got injured in this past week's game. We don't really know how serious it is, but he'll probably miss some time, so they went out and got a veteran to take over as a starter for now. So when looking into that signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers and looking at McQuide and what he could bring in his history, he's a player who's been in the league since 2011. And he was undrafted in 2011, but he has stuck around, and he's been a long snapper for that long. So obviously, he's a good one. McQuide snapped in 7 games this past season, 3 with the Dolphins and 4 with the Vikings. In total, he appeared to 197 games in his career, and he was also a 2-time Pro Bowler during his tenure with the Rams, and he snapped in 9 games in 2023 with the Lions. So the Pittsburgh Steelers actually just released a long snapper earlier in the week, so it's surprising they didn't just bring back him, but obviously they like the addition of Jake McQuaide, a veteran better, and he believes, or Mike Tomlin believes, that this could be a player that can actually replace Christian Kuntz if the injury is actually serious, because of how many games he's appeared in and his veteranness at that position. And obviously you want someone who could actually do it at a high level, because a long snapper position is important for special teams. If your special teams messes up, it gives the opposing team's offense better chance of scoring points, which gives you a chance to lose the game. So the Steelers want to make sure they have that position secured. Obviously, all the best to Christian Kuntz. Hopefully it's not a serious injury, but now it's a takeover at the position for now by Jake McQuaide. Now, let's move over to the last signing the Pittsburgh Steelers made today, because it was offensive tackle Julian Pearl. And when looking at Julian Pearl, he is a player that originally signed with the Baltimore Ravens as an undrafted free agent following last year's NFL draft, 2024. And then he spent time with the Minnesota Vikings and then the Cleveland Browns. Pearl played college football at Illinois, where he actually was named to all Big Ten honorable mention in 2022 and 2023. He started in 23 consecutive games to finish his career. So he is now a Pittsburgh Steeler. So just to kind of recap, when looking at the long snapper the Pittsburgh Steelers just signed in McQuaide and offense tackle Julian Pearl, do I believe they have a chance to make this roster? Well, Julian Pearl, probably not. Julian Pearl is going to go into this offensive line room who the Pittsburgh Steelers probably already have secured in terms of who they know is going to make this roster. Does he have a chance to make this practice squad, however? Yes, he does. Does he have a chance to go and show out and put on some film for maybe later seasons in his career? Yes. And if the Pittsburgh Steelers can trust him, maybe he'll get called back later in the season if someone gets injured. Now, does the long snapper have a chance to make this team? Yes, he actually does. I truly believe he has a chance to make this roster, and that's only if Christian Kuntz is actually injured. If Christian Kuntz is injured and he ends up going on IR or something like that, then this long snapper could be the starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers for at least the first few weeks until Christian Kuntz comes back from injury. So this is the signing out of the three that I believe actually has the best chance of making this team, because the Pittsburgh Steelers obviously are worried about Christian Kuntz's injury and have added him to the team. So now let's talk about the releases the Pittsburgh Steelers made in corresponding moves. I already talked about Roc Taylor and how that was surprising, and how Steeler Nation probably hates that one because they love Roc Taylor and thought he could make the team. But let's also talk about Breiden Fehoko, and let's talk about Devin Harper, because those players were also released today. And let's start off with Breiden Fehoko, because Breiden Fehoko is a player who the Pittsburgh Steelers have had on and off their roster for the last few years now. He's been on and off this practice squad many times. And earlier this past week, the Steelers signed him to the team and signed him to play in last week's game. And he's a player who dropped, 40 plus pounds this season after being a big guy. He still is a big guy, but he dropped 40 pounds in the offseason. The Steelers liked what he could do, but obviously he's a player who's gone now. He's usually a good run stuffer, but the Pittsburgh Steelers have a stacked defense line group. They've probably seen him as expendable and got rid of him to sign some other players. And looking at Devin Harper, it's the same thing. The Steelers are stacked at linebacker, especially inside linebacker. They have many players already on the bubble who could actually be really good depth pieces for this team. So if those players are expendable, and we don't know if maybe Mark Robinson will even make this team, then you could see why Devin Harper was expendable in this term of releases to sign some other players. So that's my thoughts on those two players being released. They're just expendable because the position they're at is stacked. Can they be back in the future for the practice squad? Yes. Breiden Fehoko has been on this team many times, so maybe he could be back. Anyway, that's the end of this video, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. On the 3 additions the Pittsburgh Steelers have signed today, who's more likely to make this team? Do you think any of those guys will make this roster? And do you like any of them? And also based on the releases that we have, the cuts, who is a shocking cut to you? And do you think any of those guys, or do you want any of these guys back on this roster in the future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And also, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news, updates, highlights, analysis reports, everything surrounding this team. I've covered it for you this offseason. Every new addition, their introduction is on the channel for players, so go ahead and check it out. And with the season starting up shortly, I have you covered. This is the best spot for Pittsburgh Steelers football. So stay tuned, like, comment, and subscribe, turn notifications for this channel. And until next time, until the video tomorrow, I'll see you guys all later. That's it for me. I'm out. Peace.